We decided you're not coming. My mom will go instead. Jessica's voice cut through the morning air like a knife as she stood in my kitchen, sipping coffee from my favorite mug. I don't want to babysit an old lady during my vacation. The words hit me like a slap, but I kept my face perfectly calm. Thomas, my son, stood behind her looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. Again. My grandson Samuel stared at his shoes, embarrassed by his mother's cruelty. "Have a nice trip," I said simply, turning back to my morning toast. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from, because what happened next changed everything. Jessica smirked, thinking she'd won. Oh, honey, if only she knew that her little performance had just handed me the perfect opportunity I'd been waiting for. You see, I may be 68, but I didn't survive 40 years as a trauma nurse by being weak. I learned to read people, to see through their masks. And Jessica? Well, let's just say her mask had more holes than a piece of Swiss cheese. "The resort has a spa, Eleanor," she continued, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "You wouldn't enjoy all that walking anyway. My mother loves Caribbean cruises, right? Because apparently 68 equals decrepit in Jessica's world. I'd run 3 marathons in my 50s, but sure, walking on a beach would probably kill me." Thomas finally spoke up, but only to enable her. "Mom, maybe next time we can plan something more. Suitable for you. Suitable for me." As if I hadn't raised this man alone after his father died, working double shifts to put him through architecture school. As if I hadn't been the one babysitting Samuel every weekend while they went to their fancy lawyer parties. But who's keeping track, right? "Of course, dear," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I have plenty to keep me busy here." And I did. Because while Jessica thought she was so clever, so untouchable, I had been watching, waiting. And now, thanks to her little performance this morning, it was time to act. After they left to pack, I walked to my bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept my most important documents. Hidden beneath old photo albums was a manila envelope that would change everything. Inside were phone records, bank statements, and several very interesting photographs. You see, Jessica had gotten sloppy. 3 months ago, I noticed she'd been taking a lot of client meetings that lasted until midnight, because apparently lawyers do their best work after everyone else goes to sleep. How professional. When she started volunteering to pick up Samuel from school every day, something she'd never done before, I knew something was deeply wrong. Jessica suddenly becoming Mother of the Year was about as believable as a unicorn applying for a job, so I did what any smart woman would do. I called my old friend Detective Rodriguez from my nursing days and asked for a recommendation. 3 weeks later, I had a private investigator and a growing file of very interesting photographs. The next morning, I drove to my lawyer's office downtown. Marcus Webb had been my attorney for 15 years, ever since Harold passed away. He was one of the few people who knew the real reason behind my sudden interest in updating my will. "Eleanor, are you absolutely sure about this?" Marcus asked, reviewing the documents spread across his mahogany desk. "These changes are significant." "Completely sure," I replied, signing my name with a steady hand. "I've had 3 weeks to think about it, and frankly, that's 3 weeks too many." The first document transferred the deed of my house, worth nearly $400,000, into a trust for Samuel. Jessica had been counting on inheriting it when I died. Surprise! Turns out the old lady knows how to use a lawyer, too. The second removed Jessica as the secondary beneficiary on my life insurance policy. Thomas would still get his share, but Jessica's name was erased completely. Poof! Gone faster than her fake smiles when she thought nobody was watching. The third was the most satisfying. I was creating a college fund for Samuel with money from my savings account, an account Jessica assumed didn't exist because she never bothered asking about my finances. Amazing how people who want your money never actually want to know about your money. The timing of this, right before their trip, Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Perfect timing," I corrected. "Have you prepared the envelope?" He handed me a thick manila folder. Inside were copies of all the legal documents, along with the photographs my private investigator had taken. Pictures of Jessica kissing her law partner Richard Hayes in his BMW. Bank records showing she'd been borrowing from the firm's client trust fund to pay for her expensive lifestyle. Phone records proving months of lies. The evidence of financial misconduct is solid. Marcus said quietly. The state bar will have to investigate, and if this goes to the authorities, that's up to Thomas to decide, I replied, though we both knew what would happen. I'm just making sure my son knows who he's really married to. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. Jessica thought she could humiliate me, exclude me from my own family, treat me like a burden to be discarded. She was about to learn that underestimating Eleanor Mitchell was the biggest mistake of her life. That evening, I prepared dinner for one and sat in my quiet kitchen, imagining their faces tomorrow at the airport. Jessica would be so focused on her victory, so eager to show off her expensive luggage and first-class tickets. She had no idea that her perfect vacation was about to become the worst day of her life. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to my dear friend Margaret. Tomorrow, the truth comes out. Wish me luck. Her response came immediately. About time. That woman had it coming. Give them hell, Eleanor. Oh, I planned to. The next morning I woke up early and put on my best dress. The navy blue one with pearl buttons that Harold always said made me look distinguished. If I was going to end Jessica's reign of terror, I was going to look good doing it. I arrived at the airport 2 hours before their flight, envelope in hand. The international terminal was buzzing with excited travelers, but I felt perfectly calm. This was the moment I'd been planning for months. When I spotted them at the check-in counter, my heart almost broke. Thomas looked genuinely happy for the first time in years, and Samuel was bouncing with excitement about his first trip to the Caribbean. Jessica stood between them like a queen surveying her kingdom, her designer luggage strategically positioned for maximum show. "Eleanor!" Samuel ran over and hugged me. "Grandma, I wish you were coming with us." "Oh, sweetheart, Grandma has important things to do here," I said, ruffling his hair. "But I brought you something for the trip." I handed him a small wrapped package, a travel journal I'd picked out just for him. "Promise me you'll write about all your adventures." "I will. Thanks, Grandma." Jessica approached with her fake smile firmly in place. "How sweet of you to see us off, Eleanor. Though you really didn't need to come all this way." "Oh, but I did," I replied smoothly. "I have something very important for Thomas." I pulled out the manila envelope and handed it to my son. "Don't open this until after takeoff, honey. It's sensitive family business that shouldn't wait until you get back." Thomas looked confused, but took the envelope. "Mom, what is this about?" "Just some documents that need your attention," I said, keeping my voice light. "Nothing urgent but important. You know how paperwork can be." Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly. She'd always been suspicious of my motives, probably because she couldn't imagine anyone being genuinely kind without an agenda. Takes one to know one, I suppose. "Well," she said, checking her expensive watch, "we should get through security. First-class boarding starts soon." Of course it was first class, because flying with the peasants would simply be unbearable for Princess Jessica. I hugged Samuel tightly, then Thomas. When Jessica leaned in for our usual awkward air kiss, I whispered just loud enough for her to hear, "Enjoy your last family vacation, dear." The color drained from her face faster than water down a sink, but before she could respond, I was already walking away. "Have a wonderful trip," I called over my shoulder, giving them a cheerful wave. I practically skipped to my car. At 71, I was finally learning the joy of well-timed dramatic exits. As I drove home, I wondered how long it would take. The flight to Barbados was 4 hours. Thomas would probably wait an hour after takeoff, maybe 2. By tonight, my phone would be ringing, and Jessica's perfect life would be over. I was arranging flowers in my garden when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Thomas's number, and I could hear the airplane engines in the background. Right on schedule. "Mom." His voice was hollow, devastated. "We need to talk." "How was takeoff, dear?" I asked calmly, snipping a rose stem. "I hope the weather cooperated." Just don't." I could hear him struggling not to cry. "Jessica is in the bathroom. She's been in there for 20 minutes since I showed her the photos." "Oh my. Motion sickness can be terrible at altitude." "Mom, please." "And how are the photos, Thomas? Nice and clear?" I did pay extra for the high-resolution package. "How long have you known?" I set down my gardening shears and sat on my porch swing. 3 months, since she started having those late client meetings. 3 months. He was quiet for a long moment. "The bank statements. Mom, she stole almost $200,000 from client accounts. She could go to prison." "Yes, she could." And Richard Hayes. I trusted him. We've been friends since law school. I'm sorry. Thomas, I truly am. Are we really turning around? His voice broke completely now. The captain said we could return to Miami if there was a family emergency. That's your decision, son. I heard Jessica's voice in the background, sharp and panicked. Don't you dare turn this plane around! She's manipulating you! Ah, yes. Because gathering evidence of someone's crimes is manipulation now. The audacity was almost impressive. She says you planned this, Thomas said. She says you're trying to destroy our marriage. Thomas, I said gently, deadheading a particularly stubborn Petunia. Did I take those photographs? Did I make her steal that money? Did I force her to have an affair? Silence. Sometimes the best arguments are the ones that make themselves. She did this to herself, honey. I just made sure you found out before she destroyed your life completely. Think of me as a public service announcement. We're coming home, he whispered. Samuel doesn't understand what's happening. He keeps asking why Mommy is crying. My heart ached for my grandson, but this pain was necessary. Better he learn the truth now than grow up thinking it was normal to treat family members like garbage. I'll be here when you get back, I promised. Mom? Thank you. I should have protected you from her years ago. I'm so sorry. You're my son, Thomas. You don't need to apologize for loving the wrong person. After we hung up, I called Marcus. They're coming back. You might want to prepare for some very angry phone calls. Are you ready for what comes next? What? Eleanor? I looked around my peaceful garden, at the home I'd built with Harold, at the life Jessica had tried to take from me. I've been ready for months. They arrived home 6 hours later. Thomas's BMW pulled into my driveway just as the sun was setting, and I watched from my window as they sat in the car for several minutes, clearly arguing. Samuel got out first, running to my door with tears in his eyes. Grandma, why did we have to come back? Mom and Dad are fighting and nobody will tell me what's happening. I pulled him into a hug. Come inside, sweetheart. Let's get you some cookies while your parents sort things out. Thomas appeared at my door looking like he'd aged 10 years. His eyes were red-rimmed, his usual confident posture completely deflated. Where is she? I asked. In the car, making phone calls. She's calling every lawyer she knows, trying to figure out how to spin this. He laughed bitterly. She actually suggested we could work it out if I just forgot about the evidence. And? I told her I'd already called my divorce attorney. Jessica finally stormed up to my door, her perfect hair disheveled, her designer outfit wrinkled from the plane. The mask had completely slipped, revealing the vicious person underneath. Frankly, it was an improvement. At least now she was being honest. You vindictive old witch, she screamed. How dare you destroy my family? My family? I stepped outside, and despite being 24 years older, I felt like I towered over her. Samuel is my grandson. Thomas is my son. You're just someone who married into this family and forgot what respect means. I'm calling the police. This is harassment, stalking. Please do, I said calmly. I'm sure they'll be very interested in those bank records. Ask for Detective Rodriguez. Tell him Eleanor Mitchell sent you. We've become quite friendly. Thomas put his hand on Jessica's shoulder. Jess, stop. Just stop making it worse. She spun around to face him. Worse? She hired someone to follow me. She violated my privacy. You violated our marriage. Thomas's voice finally showed some real anger. You stole money from clients, from people who trusted you. It was borrowing. I was going to pay it back. With what? Richard's money? The name came out like poison. How long, Jessica? How long have you been lying to me? The mention of her lover hit Jessica like a physical blow. She looked between Thomas and me, realizing that her carefully constructed world was crumbling faster than she could rebuild it. Take Samuel inside, Mom, Thomas said quietly. This conversation is over. As I led my grandson into the house, I heard Jessica's voice getting more desperate, more shrill. You can't take my son away from me. I'm his mother. You should have thought about that before you decided to become a criminal, Thomas replied. From my kitchen window, I watched as Thomas loaded Samuel's suitcase into his car. Jessica stood on my driveway, screaming threats and accusations that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. But I wasn't worried. The truth was on our side now, and truth has a way of setting everyone free, even when it hurts. The next morning, my doorbell rang at 7 a.m. I opened it to find Thomas standing there with 2 suitcases and a very confused-looking Samuel. They looked like refugees from the Jessica disaster zone. "Can we stay here for a while?" Thomas asked. "Just until I figure things out?" "This is your home, too," I said, stepping aside to let them in. "Always has been. Besides, I could use some help reaching the high shelves." Samuel ran straight to the kitchen. "Grandma, do you have pancake mix? Mom never makes pancakes anymore." "Of course I do." "Sweetheart, your grandmother believes in keeping the important things well stocked: pancake mix, tissues, and evidence folders." While I cooked breakfast, Thomas sat at the kitchen table staring at his phone. 22 missed calls from Jessica, 31 text messages. "I think she's having what you might call a breakdown." "Fascinating. I haven't received a single call. It's almost like she finally understands that I'm not someone she can sweet-talk anymore." "What did your lawyer say about the custody situation?" "Emergency hearing next week. With the evidence you provided, he thinks I have a solid case." Thomas looked up at me with something I hadn't seen in years: respect mixed with guilt. "Mom, I need to ask you something. Anything. How long do you think this will take? The legal stuff, I mean." I flipped a pancake while I considered. "Honey, these things take time, months, maybe longer. Jessica's going to fight this every step of the way." "I know, I keep thinking about how I let her treat you. How I stood there and said nothing when she was cruel to you. You were trying to keep peace in your family. That's what good men do. Good men protect their mothers, too." Samuel looked up from his orange juice. "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced?" Thomas's face crumpled. "I don't know yet, buddy, but whatever happens, you'll always have me and Grandma." "Will I still see Mom?" "Of course you will. She's still your mother, Samuel. She just made some bad choices." My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Margaret. "Turn on Channel 7 News, now!" I grabbed the remote and switched on the morning news. The anchor was mid-sentence. Prominent family law attorney Jessica Mitchell was arrested last night on charges of embezzlement and fraud. The State Bar Association has opened an investigation. Thomas dropped his fork. On the screen was Jessica's mugshot, hair messy, makeup smeared, looking nothing like the polished woman who'd humiliated me just days ago. I'd seen classier photos on America's Most Wanted. "She was arrested?" Samuel asked, not understanding. "She broke some very serious rules at work," Thomas explained gently. "Now she has to face the consequences." I turned off the TV and served Samuel his pancakes. "Eat up, sweetheart. Today's a new day." And what a beautiful day it was. I hummed while I cooked, feeling lighter than I had in years. Justice served with a side of maple syrup, my favorite kind of breakfast. But as I watched my family try to process their new reality, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice was being served, but at what cost? Samuel would grow up knowing his mother was a criminal. Thomas would carry the scars of betrayal for years. Still, when I remembered Jessica's cruel words, "I don't want to babysit an old lady," I knew I'd made the right choice. Some people need to learn that actions have consequences, even if they learn it the hard way. 2 weeks later, I was watering my garden when a black sedan pulled up to my house. 2 people in suits got out: Detective Rodriguez, who I recognized from my nursing days, and a woman I didn't know. "Eleanor, good to see you again," Rodriguez said with a smile. "This is Detective Chen from Financial Crimes. We'd like to ask you some questions about Jessica's case." I invited them in and served coffee, noting how Detective Chen studied my living room like she was trying to understand what kind of person would hire a private investigator to catch their daughter-in-law. "Mrs. Mitchell, when did you first suspect Jessica of financial impropriety?" Chen asked, pulling out a notebook. "When she started buying things that didn't match their household budget. Designer handbags, expensive jewelry, spa treatments every week. Even with Thomas's architect salary, the math didn't add up." "So you hired an investigator?" "I hired someone to find out if my family was in danger. As a mother, I felt I had a right to know if my son's wife was putting them at financial risk." Detective Chen leaned forward. "Some might say your methods were unorthodox." I set down my coffee cup and looked her directly in the eye. "Detective, Jessica was stealing from vulnerable clients while planning to take my grandson and disappear. Tell me, what part of protecting my family was unorthodox?" The detectives exchanged glances. Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Mrs. Mitchell, we need to ask, Did you know about Jessica's travel plans? This was new information. What travel plans? We found evidence that she was planning to leave the country with Samuel. One-way tickets to a non-extradition country, purchased the week before your family's Caribbean trip. My blood ran cold. Samuel, my innocent grandson, had been days away from being kidnapped by his own mother. How long would she have gotten away with it? I asked. Hard to say. She was very careful about covering her tracks. If you hadn't intervened when you did, Detective Chen shrugged meaningfully. That evening, when Thomas got home from work, I told him about the detective's visit. She was going to kidnap Samuel? He sank into Harold's old recliner, looking like someone had punched him in the stomach. Take him and just disappear? It appears that way. My God, Mom, if you hadn't figured out what she was doing. He buried his face in his hands. I almost lost my son forever because I was too blind to see what my wife really was. Thomas, you're a good man who wanted to believe the best about someone you loved. That's not blindness, that's hope. Hope nearly cost me everything. Samuel wandered into the living room with his homework, oblivious to the conversation about how close he'd come to losing his entire life. Dad, can you help me with this math problem? Of course, buddy. Thomas wiped his eyes and patted his lap. What are you working on? As I watched my son help his child with algebra, I felt that familiar mix of relief and sadness. We were safe, but at what cost? Samuel would grow up knowing his mother had planned to kidnap him. Thomas would carry the guilt of nearly losing his son to his own poor judgment. But we were together. That had to count for something. 3 months later, I was getting ready for Jessica's sentencing hearing when Samuel knocked on my bedroom door. Grandma? Are you going to court today? Yes, sweetheart. Your dad and I need to be there. Will Mom be there? I sat on my bed and patted the space next to me. Samuel climbed up, looking smaller than his 12 years despite having grown 2 inches since this whole ordeal began. Yes, she'll be there. The judge is going to decide what happens next. Dad says she might go to jail for a long time. She might. She did some very serious wrong things, Samuel. When adults make choices that hurt other people, sometimes they have to face serious consequences. He was quiet for a moment, swinging his legs over the edge of my bed. Grandma, are you glad Mom is in trouble? The question hit me harder than I'd expected. Was I glad? When I saw Jessica in handcuffs on the news, when I heard she'd been disbarred, when Thomas told me she'd been evicted from her apartment, did I feel satisfaction or sadness? I'm glad the truth came out, I said carefully. I'm glad your dad knows who he was really married to. I'm glad you're safe. But Samuel, I take no pleasure in seeing anyone's life fall apart, even someone who was cruel to me. Do you think she'll ever be nice again? I don't know, sweetheart. But I hope she learns from her mistakes. The courthouse was packed with reporters and curiosity seekers. Jessica sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, looking nothing like the confident lawyer who'd once ruled our family with manipulation and threats. When the judge asked if anyone wanted to make a victim impact statement, Thomas stood up. Your Honor, Jessica Mitchell didn't just steal money from clients. She stole 3 years of my life, made me an unwitting accomplice in her emotional abuse of my mother, and nearly cost me my relationship with my son. She was planning to kidnap my child and flee the country. The financial crimes are serious, but the emotional damage to my family may never fully heal. Jessica's court-appointed lawyer requested leniency, claiming she was a first-time offender who'd made mistakes due to stress and mental health issues. The judge listened patiently, then spoke directly to Jessica. Mrs. Mitchell, you violated the trust of your clients, your family, and your profession. The evidence shows you planned to flee the country with a minor child, which suggests this was not a momentary lapse in judgment, but a calculated scheme. I sentence you to 3 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. 3 years. It felt like justice, though I found myself feeling unexpectedly sad watching Jessica led away in handcuffs. She'd brought this on herself, but seeing anyone's life completely destroyed is never easy to witness. As we left the courthouse, Samuel asked, Grandma, what happens now? I took his hand. Now we go home and live our lives. Honestly, happily, and with respect for each other. Will you teach me to make your chocolate chip cookies? I smiled. I thought you'd never ask. Can we add extra chocolate chips? Since Mom's not here to complain about sugar intake? Samuel Mitchell, I like the way you think. 8 months after Jessica's sentencing, life had settled into something resembling normalcy. Thomas had moved permanently into my house. We'd converted the old sewing room into his home office. Samuel was thriving at his new school and had made the baseball team. But I'd be lying if I said everything was perfect. Thomas still struggled with guilt over not seeing Jessica's true nature sooner. Samuel had nightmares sometimes about his mother trying to take him away, and I found myself looking over my shoulder more than I cared to admit, wondering if Jessica had friends on the outside who might blame me for her downfall. It was during one of these quieter moments that William Harrison entered our lives. I was pruning roses in my garden when a car I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. A tall, distinguished man with silver hair got out, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers that looked like he'd picked them from his own garden. "Mrs. Mitchell? I'm William Harrison. I live 3 houses down, the blue house with the white shutters." "Oh yes, the retired judge. I remember hearing you moved in last spring." "That's right. I was wondering. Would you like to have coffee sometime? I make terrible coffee, but my neighbor Margaret tells me you make excellent conversation." I laughed, surprised by his directness. "Margaret's been talking about me. She mentioned that you're someone who stands up for her family. In my 30 years on the bench, I learned to recognize strength when I see it." I looked at this man. William really looked at him. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and something about his presence felt genuinely peaceful. "I make coffee every morning at 8, I said. "You're welcome to join me tomorrow. Fair warning, though, my life's been a bit dramatic lately." "I'll take my chances," he said with a warm smile. After he left, I called Margaret immediately. "You meddling old hen," I said, but I was laughing. "What have you been telling that poor man about me?" "Only the truth, Eleanor. That you're the strongest woman I know, and you deserve someone who appreciates that strength." That evening at dinner, I mentioned William to Thomas and Samuel. "Grandma has a boyfriend," Samuel announced gleefully. "I do not. He's just a neighbor being friendly." Thomas grinned. "Mom, you're allowed to be happy. Dad would want that for you. Your father's been gone 8 years, Thomas. I've been happy. You've been surviving. There's a difference." Over the next few weeks, William became a regular presence at my breakfast table. He was intelligent, funny, and refreshingly honest. He'd lost his wife to cancer 5 years earlier and understood grief without trying to fix it. More importantly, he treated me like an equal. When I told him about Jessica and the airport incident, he listened without judgment. "You protected your family," he said simply. "That's what mothers do. Some people think I was vindictive. Some people don't understand the difference between justice and revenge. You chose justice." Samuel adored William, especially when he discovered that William had been a Little League coach for 30 years. Thomas approved too, though he warned William with mock seriousness that he'd have to answer to both him and Samuel if he hurt me. "I have no intention of hurting your mother," William assured him. "She's been hurt enough for one lifetime." One evening, as William and I sat on my porch swing, watching Samuel practice baseball in the yard, he asked, "Do you ever regret how things happened with Jessica?" I considered the question carefully. I regret that it had to happen at all. I regret that Samuel lost the mother he thought he had. But do I regret stopping her from destroying my family? Never. "Good," he said, taking my hand. "A woman who doesn't protect what she loves isn't worth loving." For the first time since Harold died, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was living again. 2 years after Jessica's sentencing, I was frosting Samuel's 14th birthday cake when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I barely recognized. Jessica stood on my porch, thinner than I remembered, wearing a simple blue dress and carrying a small bag. Her hair was shorter, grayer, and her face looked older than her 44 years. Prison had aged her in ways that time alone couldn't explain. "Hello, Eleanor," she said when I opened the door. "May I come in?" "Samuel's not here. He's at baseball practice with William." "I know. I came to see you." I hesitated, then stepped aside. She entered my living room cautiously, like she was afraid I might attack her. "You look well," she said, sitting on the edge of Harold's old chair. "Prison seems to have taught you manners." She flinched but didn't defend herself. "I deserved that." "You deserved a lot more than that." We sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. Finally, Jessica spoke. "I want to apologize. Not because my lawyer told me to, not because I'm trying to get something from you. I want to apologize because I was wrong, and I hurt people I should have loved. And I want to ask for a second chance. Not with Thomas. I know that's over. Not even with Samuel. Necessarily, though I hope someday he'll let me back into his life. I want a second chance to be a decent human being. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, the old Jessica hiding behind rehearsed words. But what I saw was something I'd never seen before. Genuine remorse. What do you want from me? Jessica? A job. Margaret told me you volunteer at the free clinic downtown. They need a receptionist, someone to answer phones, schedule appointments, help people who can't afford health care. You want to work at a clinic? I want to help people instead of using them. I want to do something that matters, something that helps instead of hurts. She reached into her bag and pulled out a letter. This is from my therapist in prison. She says I have something called narcissistic personality disorder. She says it's not an excuse, but it's an explanation for why I treated people the way I did. I took the letter, but didn't read it. And you think that changes things? No, but I hope it means I can do better. Jessica, you humiliated me. You stole money from people who trusted you. You were planning to kidnap my grandson and disappear to another country. I know. Tears started flowing down her cheeks. I know, and I can never undo any of it. But Eleanor, I'm asking you to give me a chance to try to make amends. Not for forgiveness, I don't deserve that, but for the chance to prove I can be better. I looked at this broken woman sitting in my living room, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw someone genuine. The mask was finally gone, and underneath was just a damaged person who'd made terrible choices. The clinic job pays minimum wage. You'd be cleaning bedpans and dealing with people who are sick, scared, and sometimes angry. You'd be working for Dr. Martinez, and she doesn't tolerate drama or attitude. I understand. If you mess up even once, if you're late or rude or dishonest in any way, you're gone. And I'll make sure you never work in this town again. I understand. And Jessica, if you ever hurt Samuel again, what I did before will look like kindness compared to what I'll do next. She nodded, still crying. Thank you. Eleanor, you don't know what this means to me. Don't thank me yet. Prove you deserve it first. After she left, I called Dr. Martinez and explained the situation. She agreed to give Jessica a chance, with the understanding that she'd be on probation indefinitely. That evening, when Thomas and Samuel got home, I told them about Jessica's visit. She wants to work at the clinic? Thomas asked incredulously. She wants to try to make amends. Do you believe her? I thought about it honestly. I believe she's trying to change. Whether she'll succeed is another question entirely. Samuel, now taller than me at 14, asked quietly, Does this mean Mom might be normal someday? I don't know, sweetheart, but people can change if they really want to. Your mother hurt us badly, but that doesn't mean she can't learn to be better. Will you forgive her if she does? Forgiveness isn't about what other people do, Samuel. It's about letting go of anger so it doesn't poison your own heart. I forgave your mother a long time ago, not for her sake, but for mine. That night, as William and I sat on the porch swing, he asked what I was thinking about. Second chances, I said, and whether people really can change. What do you think? I think some people can. And I think those people deserve the opportunity to try. Even Jessica? Especially Jessica. If she fails, that's on her. But if she succeeds, maybe something good can come from all this pain. 1 year later, I was shopping for groceries when I spotted Jessica restocking shelves in the pharmacy section. She'd been working at the clinic for 8 months, and according to Dr. Martinez, she was reliable, punctual, and surprisingly good with difficult patients. Hello, Eleanor, she said quietly when she saw me. Jessica, how are things going? Good. Hard, but good. Dr. Martinez says I can start training to become a medical assistant if I keep up my current performance. She looked different, healthier somehow. The desperation and anger that had always shadowed her face were gone, replaced by something that looked like peace. Samuel's doing well, I offered. He made honor roll again. Thomas sends me pictures sometimes, and report cards. I know I don't have the right to ask, but do you think he'd ever want to see me? He asks about you. Not often, but sometimes. Hope flickered in her eyes. Really? He's curious about whether people can really change. I think you're his test case. No pressure there, she said with a small, self-deprecating smile. Jessica, can I ask you something? Of course. That day at the airport, when you told me I wasn't coming on the trip, did you know how much that would hurt me? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the bottles of vitamins she'd been organizing. Yes, she whispered. I knew exactly how much it would hurt you, and I wanted it to hurt. I was angry that Thomas loved you so much, angry that Samuel preferred spending time with you over me. I wanted to punish you for being everything I wasn't. And now? Now I realize that instead of trying to tear you down, I should have been trying to learn from you. You loved your family without conditions. You protected them without expecting anything in return. You were the mother and grandmother I should have been. I felt an unexpected tightness in my throat. Jessica, you're still Samuel's mother. That will never change. But I'm not the mother he deserves. Not yet, anyway. Yet is the important word there. She looked at me with surprise. You really think I can change? I think you already have. The question is whether you can keep changing. I'm trying, Eleanor. Every day I'm trying. I know you are. That evening, I told Thomas about my conversation with Jessica. He listened without comment until I finished. Do you think she's really different? He asked. I think she's working very hard to be different. Whether it lasts remains to be seen. Would you be okay if I let Samuel see her? Just for coffee or something casual? I smiled. Thomas, you don't need my permission to make decisions about your son. You're a good father. Trust your instincts. My instincts were terrible when it came to Jessica before. Your instincts were clouded by love. Now you see her clearly. That's a gift, even if it's a painful one. 2 weeks later, Samuel came home from school with an announcement that surprised all of us. Dad, I want to see Mom. Thomas nearly choked on his coffee. What? I've been thinking about it for a while. Grandma says people can change if they really want to. I want to see if Mom really wants to. I watched Thomas struggle with this request. Part of him wanted to protect Samuel from any possibility of being hurt again. But another part of him, the part that was still that little boy who'd once believed his wife could do no wrong, wanted to believe in redemption too. Samuel, Thomas said carefully, are you sure about this? You don't owe her anything. I know, but I owe it to myself to find out who she is now. Smart kid. At 14, he was already wiser than most adults I knew. What would make you feel safe? I asked, remembering the conversation we'd had 2 years ago. Could we meet somewhere public? And could you and Dad both be there? Of course, Thomas said immediately. Whatever you need. That Saturday, we met Jessica at a small cafe downtown. She looked nervous, but genuinely happy to see Samuel, though she was careful not to overwhelm him with emotion. Hi, Mom, Samuel said simply. Hi, sweetheart. Jessica's voice was soft, careful. You've gotten so tall. Yeah, Grandma says I'm going to be taller than Dad soon. They talked for about an hour, carefully, like people getting to know each other for the first time. Jessica asked about school, about baseball, about his friends. She didn't make promises she couldn't keep or try to excuse her past behavior. When it was time to leave, Samuel hugged her briefly. Can we do this again sometime? I'd like that very much, Jessica said, tears in her eyes. As we walked back to our car, Samuel was quiet. How do you feel? Thomas asked. Sad, Samuel said honestly, but also hopeful. She seems different, like she's actually listening now instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. That's very perceptive, I said. Grandma, do you think she'll keep changing? I thought about the woman I'd just watched carefully navigate a conversation with her son, putting his comfort above her own need for forgiveness. I think she's trying very hard too. Whether she succeeds is up to her. Thought that was very honest of her. Are you going to see her again? I asked Samuel. Maybe, in a few weeks. She's going to send me letters first so I can get used to talking to her again without pressure. That evening, as our little family sat down to dinner, Thomas, Samuel, William, and me, I looked around the table and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. We'd survived Jessica's attempt to destroy us. More than survived. We'd emerged stronger, more honest, and more appreciative of what we had. Grandma, Samuel said suddenly, I want to thank you. For what, sweetheart? For protecting our family. I know what Mom did was wrong, and I know stopping her was hard for you. But if you hadn't, Dad says we might have lost each other forever. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Samuel, family isn't about blood. It's about love, respect, and choosing to show up for each other every day. Your mother forgot that for a while, but she's trying to remember. And you, your father, and I, we never forgot. What about me? William asked with mock indignation. Don't I count as family yet? Your family, I said, surprising myself with how easily the words came. You've been family since the day you brought me wildflowers and terrible coffee. After dinner, William and I sat on the porch swing while Thomas helped Samuel with homework. The evening air was warm, filled with the scent of jasmine from my garden. Any regrets about how everything turned out? William asked. I thought about Jessica, working late at the clinic, slowly rebuilding her life one small kindness at a time. I thought about Thomas, confident and happy in a way he'd never been during his marriage. I thought about Samuel, learning that love requires boundaries and that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. You know what I've learned? I said finally. What's that? Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's just becoming the person you were always meant to be. And who were you meant to be, Eleanor Mitchell? I smiled, watching fireflies dance in my garden. A woman who protects what she loves. A grandmother who teaches her family that respect is earned, not inherited. A person who believes in second chances, but never third ones. And a woman who makes excellent coffee, William added. That too. As we sat there in comfortable silence, I thought about that terrible morning 3 years ago when Jessica had announced I wasn't welcome on their family vacation. If someone had told me then that it would lead to this, to a stronger family, to justice served, and to finding love again at 71, I never would have believed them. But life has a funny way of turning our worst moments into our greatest blessings. Jessica had tried to diminish me, to make me feel like a burden to be discarded. Instead, she'd given me the opportunity to show my family exactly who I was. A woman who wouldn't be pushed around, who wouldn't accept cruelty disguised as love, and who would fight for her family with every breath in her body. Thank you, Jessica, I whispered into the evening air. William looked at me curiously. Did you just thank the woman who tried to destroy your family? I thanked the woman who accidentally saved it, I corrected. Sometimes our enemies give us the greatest gifts. They show us exactly how strong we really are. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of laughter from my kitchen. Samuel was telling William about his baseball game while Thomas read the newspaper and commented on the terrible state of local politics. This was my family. Not perfect, not without scars, but built on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. We'd weathered Jessica's storm and emerged intact. And as I joined them at the breakfast table that had witnessed so much pain and healing, I realized something profound. I wasn't just Eleanor Mitchell, the woman who'd been humiliated at an airport. I was Eleanor Mitchell, the woman who'd refused to accept that humiliation as her story's ending. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. And we were living very, very well indeed. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.